Very warm welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to our viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Mike Embley. Our top stories. Counting is underway in the Alabama Senate race. It will be controversial. Will Republican Roy Moore be the winner? A change of tune. North Korea, the US says it's ready to open talks without preconditions. The world is losing its fight against global warming. France's president gives other world leaders a blunt warning. Also in the programme, on a red carpet not so far away, the latest Star Wars feels the Royal Force at its European premiere. Hello to you. After weeks of scandal and vicious political infighting, first indications are in of a likely result from the US state of Alabama. The southern state has long been a deeply conservative Republican stronghold. If the special Senate election there has gone to a Democrat, it would be the first time in a country, and it has national implications. It could put at risk the slim Republican majority in the Senate. David Willis is our correspondent in Washington. David, we should say, first of all, looking at the political history of Alabama, it is extraordinary that this special Senate election race is even close.
Absolutely, Mike. I mean, this is a deeply red state in the deep South, which you would have thought would have normally not thought twice about turning a Republican candidate to the Senate to succeed Jeff Sessions. But those allegations of sexual misconduct leveled against the Republican candidate Roy Moore have turned everything on its head and have given the Democratic rival, Doug Jones, everything to play for. Now, the polls closed just over an hour ago. It is officially too close to call, according to the news outlets here in the United States. The Democrats have been working hard to get out the black vote in Birmingham, as I mentioned, but the fear amongst Republicans is that those white conservative voters could decide to stay at home, having been put off by the allegations, those lurid allegations leveled against Roy Moore. Turnout, it seems, is probably going to be the key to all this. But as you say, quite astonishing that we're even in this apparent neck-and-neck type situation in the first place. Who would have thought it just a few months ago, Mike?
David, we're keeping an eye, just for anybody watching the screens now, keeping an eye on that podium just next to you, because it's quite possible Roy Moore will come out to speak very shortly. Roy Moore, of course, endorsed by President Trump and by his former very close advisor, Steve Bannon. There could hardly be a more dramatic choice between the two candidates, of course.
Absolutely. Roy Moore is an arch conservative, a former judge, a man who was twice had to give up his seat on the state Supreme Court after flouting federal orders there against Doug Jones, who is a former U.S. local attorney general, a man who prosecuted several members of the Ku Klux Klan in the past down there in Alabama. And it is Doug Jones's statement about being pro-choice that has some voters down there, as I say, in that very deeply conservative state of Alabama. Roy Moore, though, remains very controversial because of all these allegations of sexual misconduct that have been leveled against him. President Trump, initially tepid in his support for Roy Moore, has been more full-throttled, if you like, of late. Are senior members of the Republican Party, Mike, who are very dubious, to put it mildly, about Roy Moore. And there is every indication that should Roy Moore pull off a victory in this race, then he will be subject to an ethics inquiry by members of the Senate, which could result in him being expelled from the chamber.
And quite apart from those allegations, which, as you say, of course, he denies, Roy Moore also said homosexual conduct should be illegal. He said Muslims should be banned from serving in Congress, that 9/11 was divine retribution. And just during this campaign told an African American, didn't he, that the last time the United States was great was during the time. If he wins, it does raise all kinds of questions about what kind of allegations against a candidate now are unacceptable to the voters and to their party.
Yes, and a lot of Republican voters who were tapped on the way in for their comments, the way to the voting booths today for their comments, said that they regarded the allegations against Roy Moore as fake news, if you like. That's something that the candidate himself has taken up from Donald Trump's own playbook, if you like. But of course, there are those who say that this is very disturbing stuff at a time just after basically 3 members of Congress were forced to resign over sexual misconduct allegations just last week, Mike.
And we'll take viewers, of course, back to Alabama as soon as we have anything that looks like a result we can confirm. For the moment, David, thank you very much indeed. Now, Liberia's Electoral Commission has announced that the second round of the elections will take place on the 26th of December. In a court challenge, former soccer star George Weah faces Vice President Joseph Boakai in a poll that's been held up for several weeks. The successful candidate will replace Ellen Johnson Sirleaf as president. Firefighters in Los Angeles saying the wildfire that swept through Bel Air, one of the city's most exclusive neighborhoods, of course, started in a homeless encampment. The fire is one of several that's destroyed hundreds of homes and forced more than 100,000 people to evacuate. U.S. prosecutors have brought federal charges against the man suspected of bombing the city's main bus terminal on Monday. 3 people suffered minor injuries. Akayed badly hurt when he set off a pipe bomb strapped to his body. He'd made a Facebook post critical of President Trump on the day of the attack. The U.S. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said Washington is ready to enter into talks with North Korea without preconditions. He made those comments in a speech in Washington, D.C., and he added that Pyongyang must be willing to change course in its nuclear and missile programs.
We've said from the diplomatic side, we're ready to talk anytime North Korea would like to talk. And we're ready to have the first meeting without precondition. Let's just meet, and we can talk about the weather if you want. We can talk about whether it's going to be a square table or a round table, if that's what you're excited about. But can we at least sit down and see each other face to face? And then we can begin to lay out a map, a road map of what we might be willing to work towards. I don't think it's not realistic to say we're only going to talk if you come to the table ready to give up your program. They have too much invested in it. And the president's very realistic about that as well. And so it's really about how do you even begin the process of engagement, because we're dealing with a new leader in North Korea that no one's ever engaged with.
Rex Tillerson there, of course. The U.S. Secretary of State, Steve McDonald, is our correspondent in the South Korean capital at the moment. Stephen, it does look on the face of it like a softening of the American position, but there is no sign that North Korea is ready to give up its nuclear program, is there?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it does seem like that the US Trump administration is offering something of an olive branch, and let's assume, given them, assume they're being genuine in this. It does seem to be an attempt to break the gridlock which we have at the moment. Now, what's on offer is an initial meeting without preconditions, and then for further talks to keep happening, there'd have to be some sort of progress. Now, Rex Tillerson said this was without preconditions. He did, however, add that America would require what he described as a period of silence from North Korea in terms of further nuclear and missile tests. So his no preconditions. That's something of a precondition, though. But beyond that, as we just heard, he's saying we could talk about anything. And it is an indication that they do seem to be wanting to just somehow or other open up a dialogue, because at the moment we've got nothing. And this comes at the same time as North Korea's leader at a munitions conference in Pyongyang has just pledged to make his nation the greatest nuclear-powered country on Earth. So there is quite a gap to be bridged here.
And already, Stephen, the White House has said in an official statement there is no policy shift. The president's views on North Korea have not changed.
Yes, well, we've seen in recent times a difference of views from the US President and his own Secretary of State, with Rex Tillerson talking about having some sort of talks and Donald Trump saying the time for talking is over, we have to get tough. So I'm not quite sure what's going on in terms of the communication between those two. However, in terms of a meeting, it is interesting because North Korea does crave this type of credibility. They would love to have some sort of a meeting with the United States, and over the years, North Korea, for example, has wanted diplomatic recognition from the US. And it could be that this is a way forward to start some sort of dialogue. But the positions they have are just so different. The US says, again, we just heard that from Rex Tillerson, this is going to start a process which may lead towards denuclearisation. Well, you know, the North Koreans have shown no indication that they're prepared to go anywhere down that path, and so we have two very different positions and up until now a deadlock. So we'll just have to see what comes out of Pyongyang in the coming hours in terms of what they make of this offer from the Trump administration.
Steve, thank you very much for that. The French President, Emmanuel Macron, has warned the world is losing the battle against climate change. He was speaking at the One Planet Summit in the French capital 2 years after that historic Paris Agreement. Mr. Macron said the rise in global temperatures had become a permanent emergency and nobody, he said, could claim they didn't know. The BBC's Lucy Williamson reports from Paris.
The French president has a way of sending messages. This one involved a river cruise. His guests, kings, prime ministers and business leaders, may have different visions and different values, it seemed to say. When it comes to the future of the planet, we're all in the same boat.
Bonjour, mesdames et messieurs.
No, and it was true. But for the last 20 years or so, we've known, and we're finding out more every day.
The World Bank has said it will stop funding oil and gas exploration from 2019. And there are new commitments from business on renewable energy. But how much will these commitments mean without the world's only superpower? US President Donald Trump has said his country is pulling out of the Paris Agreement, and Mr. Macron's show of solidarity is partly aimed at him. Just along the river from the summit venue is a reminder of France's long relationship with America, its shared history, shared values. Emmanuel Macron has been positioning himself as a global leader on human rights and democracy, and now on climate change. But this time at least, Donald Trump isn't here. Before the meeting, the British Prime Minister Theresa May met Mr. Macron at the Élysée Palace, another bilateral relationship undergoing change. But few of the agreement's most powerful leaders were here in Paris. This meeting was less about policies and more about a political message that with or without the United States, this agreement will survive. Lucy Williamson, BBC News, Paris.
Don't go away, much more to come for you on BBC News, including this. Born with her heart outside her body. Meet the baby girl who's undergone a pioneering operation. Good to have you with us on BBC News. The latest headlines for you. Voting is closed in the US state of Alabama in an election which could affect Republican control of the US Senate. The party's candidate Roy Moore is accused of preying on teenage girls. The American Secretary of State Rex Tillerson has said the American government is willing to talk to North Korea without preconditions. It appears to be a change from previous demands, but the White House has already said that there's been no policy shift. A baby girl born with her heart outside her body has survived in what is thought is the first case of its kind in the UK. Baby's just 3 weeks old, has undergone 3 operations to place her heart back within her chest. There was a similarly successful operation on a baby in Texas. Our medical correspondent Fergus Walsh's exclusive report does contain graphic images.
Good girl. Yeah, she's a beautiful girl.
Their pride and joy. This is Vanellope, astounding her parents and doctors with her. After 3 operations in 3 weeks, her heart is now back inside her chest. Vanellope's parents say the moment she was born, they knew she was a fighter.
She came out kicking and screaming.
And then she gave all the surgeons aggro, didn't she?
It was a beautiful moment, wasn't it? Absolutely beautiful. If you saw when she was first born to where she is now and what they've done, it's
beyond a miracle, isn't it?
The family knew from the first ultrasound that Vanellope's heart was outside her chest. You can clearly see its unusual position, which is due to the absence of a sternum. Babies with this rare condition are usually stillborn, but immediately she emerged during the caesarean section, doctors could see that Vanellope's heart was beating strongly. Within minutes, they were preparing her for surgery, covering the chest with a sterile bag for protection. Now, 3 weeks on, her heart is back as it should be, covered with her own skin. Vanellope is going to be here for some considerable time. The next step will be getting her to breathe without the help of a ventilator. Then, in years to come, she faces more surgery to create a new sternum to protect her heart.
There may be strategies whereby we can put some internal bony protection in, whether that's with 3D printing, either of something plastic or maybe even something organic that might grow with her.
This little girl was born in Texas with the same condition and was allowed home after 3 months. Doctors created a special chest shield to protect her heart. Audrina is now 5 years old and still doing well. That is the hope for Vanellope. She faces a long road ahead, but has already confounded predictions. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, Leicester.
At least one person has been killed, 18 others hurt in a huge explosion that rocked a gas hub in Austria. The blast was at the Baumgarten site, a major hub for imported Russian gas, just east of the capital, Vienna. News of the explosion sent gas prices up. Italy has declared a state of emergency over its energy supplies, as Bethany Bell reports.
Austria's main gas pipeline hub in flames. An explosion at the Baumgarten plant set off a major fire. The blaze could be seen for miles. Rushed to the scene. One person was killed. The injured were taken to nearby hospitals. Production at the Baumgarten plant was suspended.
We switched to a security mode, as we do when something like this occurs. The gas flow was stopped in order not to make the situation any worse. All people working on the site were then evacuated.
The blaze was eventually brought under control. It appears to have been caused by a technical fault. The Baumgarten plant in eastern Austria is a key hub for imported Russian gas, which is sent on to a number of European countries. The company says supplies to Austria were secured, but deliveries to the south and southeast have been affected.
The gas supply towards Italy and the south is now limited. The market, gas providers in neighbouring countries and gas traders were, of course, informed. We are in regular contact. We can't say at this time when distribution will return to normal.
Italy, the largest recipient of gas from Baumgarten, has declared a state of emergency. Gas prices soared. An investigation is underway. It's not yet clear when the plant will go back online. Bethany Bell, BBC News, Vienna.
A former American sergeant who defected to North Korea at the height of the Cold War has died. Charles Jenkins is one of 4 US soldiers to abandon his unit, fearing he'd be killed in patrols or sent to fight in the Vietnam War. He was a prisoner in Pyongyang for nearly 40 years until his release in 2004. This from the BBC's Celia Hatton.
This was Charles Jenkins in Japan after spending 37 years in North Korea. As a young American soldier, he wanted to avoid ongoing military duty and being sent to fight in Vietnam. He says after getting drunk one night, he walked across the border hoping Russian forces fighting there at the time would capture him and eventually let him go home to the U.S. That didn't happen. Instead, Charles Jenkins was kept in North Korea, eventually marrying a Japanese woman who'd been abducted by the North Koreans. They made the best of it, falling in love and having 2 daughters. Then they were separated. An agreement brokered between the then Japanese Prime Minister Junichiro Koizumi and the late North Korean leader Kim Jong-il negotiated for Jenkins' wife, Hitomi Soga, to return to Japan. Years later, Charles Jenkins followed, agreeing to a 30-day sentence as punishment for deserting the U.S. military. Time served, Charles Jenkins returned to relative isolation, working in a gift shop and living the rest of his life in his wife's rural hometown. Celia Hatton, BBC News.
The royal premiere of the latest Star Wars movie has been held at London's Royal Albert Hall, 40 years since the first one. It spawned, of course, one of the most successful film franchises in history. Princes William and Harry were on the red carpet and in a first for the royal family in the movie, but you would be hard-pressed to spot. From our entertainment correspondent, Lisa Mazimba, there is flash photography.
The stars of Star Wars, cinema royalty, on the red carpet with actual royalty. Princes William and Harry, such fans of the saga, during filming, they secretly played cameos as stormtroopers, much to the excitement of the cast.
It was great, it was fantastic, phenomenal. And they'd done an official visit as well. They got in the X-Wing and all that kind of stuff, so it was fun.
Just one more indication of the impact the series has made since its return. One key factor in the recent success of Star Wars has been the expansion of its own universe with respect to on-screen representation of both race and gender.
I think if movies, start a conversation, I think it's a wonderful place for a reflection of societal changes, hopefully, and progress.
Stand by and action.
Shot here at Pinewood Studios, the films are among some of the most expensive ever made. Ensuring they connect with 21st century audiences is crucial. It's 5 years since some questioned the wisdom of Disney paying around $4 billion for Lucasfilm and the right to keep making Star Wars films. The first new movie made $2 billion at the global box office, and now the deal is looking like one of the Hollywood bargains.
Telling a wonderful story, creating characters that people care about. We pay attention to all those things inside these movies, and hopefully then shareholders and business and everything that goes along with it are happy, but we always start with that.
The strategy has ensured continuing adulation from fans.
Let the past die.
And helped Disney consolidate its position as Hollywood's top studio. Lisa Mazimba, BBC News.
Scientists in Britain have suggested bumblebees are much more intelligent than was previously thought. In a study, the bees were given the task of finding the most efficient routes between different sources of food. They very quickly learned to refine their flight paths despite attempts to distract them. Researchers say understanding how pollinating insects hunt for food could help ease the threat from intensive agriculture and loss of habitat. Just before we go, have a listen to this. This is officially the most number of people playing a piano piece at the same time. 20 Bosnian youngsters have set a Guinness World Record for the performance in Sarajevo. Previous record was 18 people playing the same piece simultaneously in Italy in 2014. Let's just take you back to that story from the US state of Alabama. We can show you the live pictures from Montgomery, Alabama there, expecting at some point the Republican candidate Roy Moore to appear. Voting has closed. It's a big election, this one. A special election could affect Republican control of the US Senate. But we're told that the early returns are very scattered. Vote counting is expected to take several hours. Most commentators, despite whatever you may have heard, saying it's just too early, too close to call at the moment. If this election has possibly gone to Democrat, it will be the first time in a quarter of a century. And as I said, it has national implications. It could put at risk the slim Republican majority in the Senate. Roy Moore, you're just seeing there in the midst of the crowd. Hardline fundamentalist Christian, former judge, beset by allegations of sexual misconduct and disowned by many in his own party. He's up against Doug Jones for the Democrats. Pro-choice, a former public prosecutor who helped convict members of the Ku Klux Klan for bombing a church. We'll take you there soon as we have a result. Thank you very much for watching.